The first message came in while I had a paper cup of cold coffee in one hand and a stack of climate graphics open on the studio monitor. I was supposed to record a clean little science segment about old ice, trapped air, and why Antarctic cores matter to people who live nowhere near Antarctica. Harmless stuff, at least by broadcast standards. Then my phone buzzed against the desk and showed a private message from Dr. Elias Voss, a glaciochemist I had known for 28 years. He did not waste words. He wrote, "Do not let them call it a fossil." That was all. No hello, no context, no attachment. Just that sentence. Sent from an encrypted account he only used when he was traveling for fieldwork or dealing with a government review board. I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. A fossil is old evidence of life preserved in rock or mineralized material. A preserved body is a different problem. Tissue means structure. Structure means chemistry. Chemistry means risk. If the thing came out of deep Antarctic ice, then age became a weapon in the story before anyone said alien, non-human, organism, or threat. I called Elias. The call did not connect. I sent a reply asking if he was safe. The message showed delivered, then nothing. In the next room, my producer kept asking if I wanted the methane chart before or after the oxygen isotope explanation. I told him to give me 2 minutes. I knew I was lying when I said it. The public notice hit 9 minutes later through a federal science mailing list that usually bored half the country to sleep. Non-human biological specimen recovered during deep ice drilling operation in East Antarctica. That was the full line that mattered. The rest had the dry government texture of a document written by people trying to say almost nothing. It mentioned a remote drilling site, a temporary restriction on air operations, and a coordinated review by the National Science Foundation, the United States Antarctic Program, the Department of Defense, and unnamed public health officials. It did not say fossil. It did not say animal. It did not say contamination. It used specimen, which is the word administrators choose when the real noun is too heavy for the first announcement. I stopped the recording session before we ever went live. That alone made the room quiet. I had worked science news long enough that nobody around me panicked when a space telescope failed, a hurricane strengthened, or a volcano put ash into an air route. We had procedure for ordinary bad news. This did not fit the shelf. I opened the Antarctic program page, checked the station webcams, checked the flight board out of Christchurch, and checked the usual researcher chatter. One by one, feeds either froze, redirected, or went to polite maintenance pages. McMurdo webcams stopped showing current frames. The South Pole Station page stopped updating. A live weather feed from a private contractor returned an authorization error. That was the first real confirmation. The government notice sounded vague, but the silence around it had already become organized. I have covered space missions, climate fights, weapons tests, declassified aircraft rumors, and biological containment hearings from rooms where every word had been sanded down by lawyers. Government silence has patterns. Confusion is messy. Real control is tidy. This was tidy. Within half an hour, the National Science Foundation press line routed to voicemail. A public affairs officer I knew from climate work answered once, breathed into the phone, and said she could not talk. I asked if there had been injuries. She did not answer. I asked if the site was under quarantine. She said, "Use only confirmed federal language." Then she hung up before I could ask the obvious question. Use only confirmed federal language is not a denial. It is a warning that every unofficial word now has consequences. The drilling project itself was not fantasy. That is important. This did not begin with a secret bunker under the ice or some billionaire expedition with glossy cameras and bad judgment. It began with legitimate climate research. The field team had been working under a United States-led project near the inland edge of the Allen Hills Blue Ice region, east of the Transantarctic Mountains, with support moving through McMurdo Station. The public objective was old ice, old air, and old dust. That part made sense. Antarctica keeps history inside its ice in layers of snowfall compressed across thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in some places more than 1,000,000 years. Scientists drill cores, log the layers, read volcanic ash bands, measure isotopes, count gas bubbles, and build climate records from samples colder than most freezers on Earth. This project had a second angle that never got much public attention because the words sounded too dry for television. The team was studying impact-linked dust layers and tiny glass spherules found in ancient ice and wind-scoured deposits. Microscopic material from old meteor airbursts and impacts can settle across the ice sheet and stay there if the layer remains intact. You do not need a crater under your boots to study a violent day in Earth history. You need a layer that stayed clean, a chain of custody, and enough measurements to rule out ordinary volcanic ash, wind-blown rock flour, and contamination from the drill fluid. That was why Elias was there. He was one of the people who could tell the difference between a scary claim and a sample that would survive peer review. The first fake pictures appeared before lunch. That is how fast the internet dirties a story now. A gray thing on a metal table, a long skull with black eyes, a frozen hand in a block of ice, a soldier standing beside a body bag. They were old movie props, artificial intelligence garbage, museum photos, and one still image from a documentary about a mummified seal. I threw all of them out. I told the audience that if an image had no original file history, no verifiable source, and no location data, it was entertainment, not evidence. People hated that. Panic gives people the feeling that speed equals truth. It does not. Speed gives liars a place to work. The first real detail came from a woman at the University of Colorado Boulder who would not let me use her name. She had access to a shared research server before it locked. She told me the ice core log stopped at 2,187 meters, then resumed under a new designation. The sample ID changed from climate series to restricted biological recovery. That is not standard language for a strange rock, a whalebone, a dead bird, or a dirty section of refrozen basal ice. She also said the drill team had recorded a hard contact event before the recovery. Not bedrock, not a broken cutter, something with a regular surface where no regular surface had any reason to exist. By then, I had the studio door closed and 3 phones running. My old habits came back fast. I wrote every claim on paper before I said a word aloud. Source. Time. What is known. What is assumed. What could be wrong. I had learned that during refinery accidents on the Gulf Coast and wildfire smoke events in Colorado. A person who talks too early can damage the public almost as much as a person who hides facts. The first premise needed testing. A non-human biological specimen could mean penguin, seal, fish, microbial mat, ancient contaminant, or some unknown Earth organism preserved in ice. The word alien was not evidence. It was a conclusion people wanted because it gave the fear a shape. At 1:26 in the afternoon Denver time, Washington issued the second statement. The wording changed. The specimen was now called a non-terrestrial biological structure recovered from a preserved cryogenic environment. That was the first official break in the wall. Non-terrestrial is not the same as alien body in plain speech, but no serious press office uses that phrase by accident. The statement said there was no confirmed risk to the general population. That sentence also mattered. It did not say no risk. It said no confirmed risk to the general population. That leaves the field team, the station, the transport chain, and anyone who handled the sample sitting outside the comfort zone. My producer leaned into the booth and asked if we were going live. I told him yes, but not with music, not with a banner, not with a screaming title. I wanted the story plain. I wanted people to understand why the word fossil was wrong and why the correction mattered. I started recording with no introduction beyond the facts in front of me. I told listeners that a fossil would be ancient biology transformed or recorded in mineral form. A preserved body pulled from deep ice would raise questions about tissue integrity, chemistry, or contamination, age, origin, and whether normal quarantine rules even had the right assumptions behind them. I said we did not have proof of a living threat. Then I said we had proof of a government-level containment problem. The phones lit up after that. Some callers wanted to know if Denver was safe because of the ice core facility at the Denver Federal Center in Lakewood. That was a reasonable fear from people who understood the ice core world just enough to worry. The United States keeps and studies many ice cores there, and a lot of Antarctic material has passed through Colorado. I told people there was no evidence the body had left Antarctica. I also told them not to assume the sample would come to Denver. Moving ordinary cores is already hard. Moving a preserved unknown body with possible biological activity would require cold containment, aircraft clearance, legal review, and a level of security far outside normal science logistics. Correspondent. The ordinary core chain is already strict. Ice can move from a field site to South Pole Station or McMurdo, then out through Christchurch, then by ship or land, depending on project requirements. Some South Pole cores have traveled cold by ski-equipped aircraft to McMurdo, before moving onward under freezer control. None of that is casual. A good core is kept cold because warming ruins the record. Air bubbles change, fractures grow, chemistry migrates. A contaminated unknown body is worse because cold is not only preservation. Cold might be containment. If that thing had spent a very long time stable under pressure and low temperature, every warm room, every delay, every bad seal, and every curious hand became part of the experiment. At 2:08, Elias finally answered with a voice message that lasted 11 seconds. He sounded close to wind, machinery, or both. He said, "It is not fossilized, tissue under the outer membrane, artificial material in same horizon. They are going to use the wrong word because wrong word calms people." Then the recording cut off. I played it once for myself, not on air. The voice was his. I had interviewed him after the West Antarctic ice sheet divide core work, after 2 volcanic ash papers, after one long fight over contamination in a Greenland sample. He was careful even when annoyed. If Elias Voss said tissue, he had seen data or spoken to someone who had. The artificial material changed everything. A body alone could still sit inside several explanations. Strange Earth biology, ancient contamination, a lab error. A modern object dragged downward through a crevasse and misdated by bad ice flow assumptions. But artificial material buried under the same ice horizon meant the field team had found a context. Context is the enemy of easy dismissal. If the material had the same trapped air, the same dust profile, the same chemistry around it, then it was not a glove dropped last week. If it came from a disturbed basal zone, dating could be wrong, but wrong in a technical way, not a comforting way. A wrong ice age can still wreck history. I called a retired Ice Corps handler in New Hampshire. He had no inside information, but he gave me the sober version of what could go wrong. At depth, he said, layers can deform, ice can fold. Old ice can appear above younger ice depending on flow. Near bedrock, things can get ugly. Melt, refreeze, shear, sediment, mixed layers. He wanted that said clearly, because people online had already started saying 2 million years with no evidence. Then he paused and added that none of those complications explained a whole intact biological body with artificial material beside it, unless the initial report had been badly misunderstood. He did not think the report was badly misunderstood. He had heard the same phrase I had heard: do not call it a fossil. By mid-afternoon, the Antarctic flight picture became the strongest public signal. Christchurch handles major gateway traffic for the United States Antarctic program, and when flights change there, people notice. A cargo flight scheduled south was delayed without a weather explanation. A return flight vanished from a tracker. A New Zealand contact at the airport told me passengers had been moved away from one area near the program offices. Not with drama, just with staff using calm voices and hard boundaries. At McMurdo, Phoenix Airfield and Williams Field were reported under restricted movement. Aircraft could still operate, but the normal science rhythm had stopped. Deep field operations depend on schedules, fuel, ski-equipped aircraft, and weather windows. You do not shut that machine down lightly. The first leaked audio from the field station came at 3:42. I did not play it immediately because I could not confirm it. A male voice said, "Keep it below -30. Do not cut the outer layer. Do not rinse the surface." A second voice said, "We have condensation on the inside of the shield." Then a third voice, tired and angry, said, "That is not condensation. It is coming through." The file had background noise consistent with a generator and hard wall module ventilation, but that proves less than people think. Audio can be faked. Still, the technical language matched containment work better than internet theater. Nobody in a cheap fake talks about shield interiors before screaming. The body description came in pieces, and I was careful with every piece. It was not the big-headed cartoon people expected. The person who saw a restricted still image described a compact body, about the length of a human child, but not shaped as a child. Narrow torso, 4 limbs, but the joints were wrong by human standards. Not impossible, not supernatural, just biologically unfamiliar. Yet the outer surface was dark gray under cold light, with pale seams that could have been folds, scars, or structural divisions in a skin layer. No eyes were visible in the image. No mouth was obvious. The head was covered by a rigid natural plate or a close-fitting device. The person could not tell which. That uncertainty made the picture worse, not better. The artificial material was stranger because it sounded engineered without sounding advanced in a movie way. Thin plates, matte black and dull silver, no wires visible, no writing. Some sections flexible enough to bend when freed from ice, then stiffening again when chilled. A mesh layer that did not behave as woven cloth under magnification. A fragment with repeating cavities smaller than a grain of salt. Someone used the word ceramic, someone else used metal. A materials scientist who had seen one image told me both words could be wrong. The honest phrase was manufactured material with unknown composition. That is less fun for headlines, but it is closer to how real people talk when evidence outruns vocabulary. My daughter Erin called at 4:15 from Christchurch. She worked logistics contracts, not science. She moved manifests, cargo priorities, passenger lists, cold chain paperwork, and emergency changes that made everyone else curse under their breath. She was not at the drill site. She was not in the room with the body. That mattered because I refused to turn her into a magic source. She sounded angry, more than scared. She said people had been told to stop using personal phones around program offices. She said several names were pulled from public movement boards. She said a military liaison had arrived with 2 medical officers and one person whose badge she never saw because he kept it inside his jacket. She said, "Dad, they are writing a flight plan that nobody in normal cargo would approve." I asked if the cargo was leaving the ice. She said she did not know. Then she said the one thing she did know. They were asking for a cold hold configuration below -40 and a backup power package independent of the aircraft. That narrowed the field. Ordinary ice cores do not need a separate argument at that level. They need cold handling, yes, but not armed meetings and medical officers. A preserved unknown body might. A body that changed when warmed definitely would. I told Erin to stop telling me anything that could identify her access. She snapped back that I should stop being a reporter for 10 seconds and be her father. I told her those 2 jobs had just become the same thing. The third federal statement came out at 5 o'clock sharp. It called the recovery an unprecedented astrobiological and geophysical discovery. That was the first time astrobiological entered official language. The statement also said the site remained secure and all personnel were accounted for. That was meant to calm people. It did the opposite for anyone who reads crisis language for a living. Officials usually say all personnel are safe when safe is true and useful. Accounted for means located, counted, or legally tracked. It does not mean healthy. It does not mean free to leave. It does not mean willing to speak. I brought on a microbiologist from Fort Collins who studies extremophiles. He did not indulge panic. He said frozen life is not magic. Cold can preserve, slow chemistry, and protect structure. But complex organisms do not simply wake up after geological time because a heater comes on. Cells burst. Ice crystals damage membranes. Radiation accumulates. Proteins degrade. Then he added the part that landed hard. If the body was not Earth biology, every assumption based on Earth limits became weaker. Not useless. We still know chemistry. We still know temperature, pressure, water, energy, and molecular damage. But we do not know repair systems, protective materials, dormant states, or whether the body was biological alone. He said the safest word was inactive, not dead. And that word stayed with me. Inactive does not comfort the room, and dead is a door people close. Inactive is a switch people hope nobody touches. I wrote it on the yellow pad beside fossil, preserved, tissue, artificial, quarantine, movement, and age. The page had started to look ridiculous. It belonged in a bad late-night show, except every item had a source, a timestamp, and a reason it had not been crossed out. That is how a strange crisis becomes real. Not all at once. Not with a creature walking down a hallway. It becomes real when the ridiculous words survive contact with careful people. Go. At 5:37, a Denver police contact told me federal vehicles had entered the Denver Federal Center. That did not mean the body was coming here. Federal facilities tighten when a related national event breaks. Still, the location mattered to local people. The Ice Core facility sits in Building 810 at the Federal Center in Lakewood, and for decades it has stored, curated, and allowed study of frozen cores from polar regions. People in Colorado know the Federal Center from traffic, security gates, and government office jokes. Suddenly, a place most residents ignored became part of a global story. By 6, cars had slowed along nearby roads because people were filming the entrances. Nothing useful comes from filming a gate. People do it anyway because a visible barrier feels better than an invisible threat. I told listeners to leave the Federal Center alone. That made some people mad. Good. Fear does not give anyone the right to block emergency vehicles, harass guards, or chase employees who have no say in federal decisions. I said the real questions were not at the gate. The real questions were the age of the ice, the condition of the tissue, the meaning of the artificial material, the medical status of the field team, and whether the specimen remained under stable freezing conditions. A man called in from Aurora and asked if this meant aliens built human civilization. I told him no. Evidence of a non-human body in ancient ice would not prove pyramids, angels, missing tribes, secret rulers, or any other claim people keep in storage waiting for a headline. It would prove one discovery, and one discovery is already enough to break the day. The military construction became visible before officials admitted it. Commercial satellite accounts began posting fresh images of activity near the field site. I could not verify every image in real time, but several analysts I trusted agreed on the broad picture. New vehicle tracks, a larger cleared pad, a temporary structure expanding near the drill camp, heat signatures that did not match routine operations, a line of objects arranged where aircraft cargo or fuel bladders might sit. Antarctica has no trees, no cities, and few ways to hide sudden work. You can restrict flights and cut feeds, but you cannot make a new camp invisible to every satellite overhead unless you are willing to create a larger signal by covering it. Around 7:10, a short internal memo leaked from a public health channel. I will not read every word here because some of the names were still visible when I received it, and I am not putting a technician into the center of a storm. The memo ordered biosafety posture escalation for a remote Antarctic site and thermal integrity monitoring for a recovered specimen. It listed possible exposure routes as unknown aerosol, unknown contact transfer, and unknown electromagnetic or radiological interaction. The last phrase made people lose their minds online. It did not mean the body shot radiation at people. It meant nobody yet understood all possible hazards, including non-biological ones from the artificial material. A cautious memo lists hazards before proof. That is the point of caution. The first medical rumor was ugly and almost certainly distorted. Someone claimed 3 scientists had turned violent. I could not confirm that, and I did not repeat it on air. What I could confirm through 2 separate contacts was smaller and more believable. 2 personnel had been moved from the main station module into isolation after skin irritation, eye inflammation, and confusion during a decontamination cycle. That could mean chemical exposure, cold injury, disinfectant reaction, stress, lack of sleep, or actual biological contact. In crisis reporting, ordinary explanations do not become false because the setting is extraordinary. I told listeners the symptoms were concerning, not diagnostic. Some accused me of hiding the truth. No, I was refusing to invent it. At 8 o'clock, Elias sent one more message. It was not written in his usual style. Layer age not final. Stop anyone saying million-year body. Impact horizon may be marker, but context disturbed near object. Object changed local flow. That message saved me from making a mistake. Everyone wanted age. Age drives headlines. Ancient alien body. 2 million years. Before humans. Before civilization. Before all written history. The truth was more technical and more frightening. The object itself had disturbed the surrounding ice. It had changed pressure, flow, and maybe temperature. That made dating harder, not easier. It also meant the thing had been there long enough for the ice to respond around it. Not yesterday. Not a hoax dropped into a hole. I told the audience that the three main explanations were all bad. First, the dating could be wrong because the ice had been folded, disturbed, or altered near the object. That would be embarrassing scientifically, but not comforting because it still left a body and manufactured material under deep ice. Second, the body and material could be truly ancient, which would force new history for life beyond Earth or unknown contact with Earth. Third, the body could be younger than the surrounding ice because it entered through some process we did not understand, which would mean movement through the ice sheet or a buried system capable of preserving context in ways no one had mapped. People kept asking which explanation I believed. I believed the honest one. We did not yet have enough information, and every available path led somewhere serious. The studio changed around me during those hours. Nobody left, even though nobody said much. My producer stopped joking. The overnight editor came in early and started verifying aircraft tail numbers. A younger researcher sat on the floor with a laptop because all the desks were full. Someone brought sandwiches. Nobody ate them. We were not frightened in a clean, dramatic way. We were busy, irritated, tired, and aware that the world had shifted under a normal workday. That is how big events usually enter a room. Not with music, with too many windows open on too many screens and one person saying, "Can anyone confirm this?" every few minutes. At 9:23, a caller from Pueblo said her brother was a contractor at McMurdo and had texted one phrase, "No northbound personal movement." I could not verify the brother, so I did not use the claim as fact. Then a source at Christchurch said the same thing in official language. Non-essential northbound movement from certain Antarctic program personnel had been paused pending medical and security screening. That is quarantine without using the word quarantine. It does not mean everyone is sick. It means the chain of exposure is unknown, and the program cannot risk turning flights into distribution routes. Antarctica is remote, but its logistics connect to New Zealand, the United States, Europe, cargo contractors, universities, and families everywhere. Remote does not mean sealed unless humans keep it sealed. The leaked station transcript arrived close to 10. This one had enough internal detail that I believed it came from a real operations channel, though I still warned listeners that written transcripts can be altered. The exchange described a containment sled stuck between the drill arch and the temporary medical module. Personnel were ordered to stay upwind, which made sense if there was a vapor, aerosol, or chemical concern. Someone asked if the specimen temperature had crossed -28. Someone else answered that the surface temperature had increased even after external heating was removed. That was the first sign of active energy release, assuming the transcript was real. A frozen object warming itself is not a ghost story. It is a thermodynamic emergency. The body had been kept in stable ice for a very long time, maybe under pressure, maybe insulated by the surrounding layer, maybe protected by the artificial material. Removing it changed everything. Pressure dropped, temperature shifted, light exposure changed, vibration changed, oxygen exposure changed. Microbes from human spaces became part of the surface environment. Even if the body never moved, the act of discovery was already an intervention. Scientists know this with delicate samples. You do not pull an ancient core out of the ground and pretend nothing has happened to it. You document damage, control handling, and minimize changes. Here, the sample might have been built to respond when the environment changed. That possibility sat in the center of every serious conversation I had. A Washington source finally used the word defense in a way that was not vague. He told me the Department of Defense concern was not public panic first. It was custody. If the body and material were non-terrestrial, every government with satellites, aircraft, submarines, and nuclear weapons would want to know what had been found. Antarctica is governed by treaty principles that preserve scientific cooperation and limit military activity, but military support has always existed in logistics. When a discovery becomes strategic, legal language starts fighting reality. Who owns a body found under Antarctic ice? Who controls technology found beside it? Who decides whether the world sees the data? No one had an answer ready because no one wanted to admit the question could exist. People kept asking if the alien was alive. I hated that question because alive has edges that biology still argues about on Earth. Viruses complicate the word. Dormant seeds complicate it. Frozen microbes complicate it. A preserved, non-human organism with unknown chemistry would make the word worse. So, I used the language we had. The specimen was recovered intact. Tissue had been reported. Thermal changes had been reported. Possible internal fluid movement had been reported by one source and not confirmed by another. No verified attack. No verified movement of limbs. No verified communication. No verified death either. That was the sentence that made my producer look up from his laptop and stare through the glass. The first hard piece of evidence I saw came in a still frame from an internal sample log. I will describe it without pretending I can show it here. The image showed a section of ice core beside a larger, irregular extraction block. Inside the clear and cloudy ice, a dark curve ran along one side of a compact form. The scale bars were visible. The lighting was boring, the kind used by lab workers who care more about documentation than drama. Beside the block was a tray with 3 fragments of artificial material, each tagged, each still rimmed with cloudy ice. The label did not use alien. It used recovered associated manufacture. That phrase was so ugly and so administrative that I believed it more than any dramatic caption. I sent the image to 2 people who know image manipulation better than I do. One said there were no obvious signs of generation or compositing in the version I had, though the file history had been stripped. The other warned that stripped history meant the image could not carry the story alone. That was fair. Evidence is not a single brick. It is a wall built out of many bricks, and some of them crack under weight. I did not air the image. I described the existence of a still frame under review and said the core question had not changed. If real, it supported 2 claims already sourced elsewhere: intact biological material and associated manufactured fragments in the same ice context. And near midnight, Erin called again. Her voice had changed. She said there had been an argument over whether to fly a small containment team south or move the specimen north. She heard one medical officer say the field site was not built for long-term containment. She heard a science lead say transport would be worse because the specimen was changing. She heard a military voice say, "Then stabilize it there." That sentence scared her because stabilize can mean a lot of things. Power, cooling, isolation, sedation if something is alive, destruction if command decides preservation risks more than knowledge. She asked if they would destroy it. I said I did not know. That was the only honest answer I had, and it felt useless. The audience was different by then. Early listeners had treated the story as a strange headline. By midnight, where people were calling from hospital break rooms, police dispatch centers, university labs, truck stops, and kitchens where children were asleep. Some wanted reassurance. Some wanted permission to panic. I gave neither. I told people the practical risk to ordinary Americans remained low based on what we knew. The body was in Antarctica. The exposure chain was limited. The greatest immediate danger was misinformation, reckless travel to federal sites, harassment of scientists, and political actors using the information vacuum to sell whatever they already wanted people to believe. Then I said the scientific and historical risk was enormous. Both things can be true at the same time. At 0031 Antarctic operational time, according to the transcript, the temporary containment module lost stable cooling for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. That number came from a refrigeration alarm log. not from a dramatic message. The backup unit started. The primary unit restarted. 4 minutes and 40 seconds at those temperatures would not matter for a frozen turkey. It might matter for a specimen that had already begun generating heat or changing state near a threshold. After the alarm, 2 personnel reported frost accumulation on the inside of their face shields while inside the airlock. Frost inside a shield can come from breath and bad seal discipline. It can also come from unexpected moisture in a place that should be dry. The log did not explain which. The phrase "not dead" surfaced after that. It came from a scientist in a leaked audio file who sounded exhausted, not excited. "I am not signing a transfer document that calls this dead. I will sign inactive. I will sign unknown viability. I will not sign dead." Then another voice said, "Command needs a category." The scientist answered, "Command can learn to live without one." I played that clip after removing names because the public needed to understand the dispute. Scientists were not all trying to hide proof. Some were fighting language from inside the system because language decides procedure. A dead object can be transported. An inactive, unknown organism under changing conditions demands containment. By morning, the president had been briefed. We know that because the White House schedule changed and congressional leadership went into a closed meeting. Nobody needed to leak content for the outline to show. The public statement said the United States was coordinating with treaty partners and international scientific bodies. It also said there was no indication of hostile activity. No indication of hostile activity is another carefully shaped sentence. It does not mean no activity. It means whatever happened at the field site had not been categorized as attack, sabotage, or intentional threat. That was probably true. The danger in the first day did not come from the body chasing anyone. It came from humans trying to decide what box to put it in before the box killed someone. I slept for 26 minutes with my head on folded arms and woke to a researcher shaking my shoulder. She had a report from an orbital debris tracking group of all places. Several people were asking whether the Antarctic object might have fallen recently from space and tunneled or melted into old ice. The physics did not support the lazy version. A hot object does not slip neatly through kilometers of ice and leave a clean, ancient layer around itself. It melts, fractures, creates a thermal scar, and disturbs everything. A cold object delivered by some controlled mechanism is a different matter, but then we are no longer talking about accidental meteorite fall. We are talking about arrival, burial, or emplacement. Each word points to a different nightmare for history. Elias appeared on a secure video call at 7:15 in the morning, Denver time. He looked bad. His beard had iceburn at the edges, and one cheek showed a red line from a mask seal. He was in a room with blank wall panels behind him. He said he had 3 minutes, and maybe less. I asked if he was in Antarctica. He said, "Close enough for now," which meant yes, or tied to the operation in a way he could not admit. He told me the body had been found beside a curved section of manufactured shell, not scattered fragments. The team initially thought the drill had struck a buried instrument package from some old project. Then the camera showed the curve continued beyond the borehole. They widened the recovery area and found the biological form nested against it. That detail changed my picture. It was not a lone corpse in ice. It was a body associated with structure, maybe debris, maybe a vehicle, maybe a protective capsule, maybe a shelter, maybe a suit. We did not know. Elias said the shell material had no visible corrosion and no conventional fasteners. He also said the surrounding ice contained impact dust markers, but the team did not yet know whether those markers dated the object, the ice that later folded around the object, or a disturbed layer caught against it. Then he leaned closer and said, "The specimen was not crushed. Remember that. At that depth, in that ice, with that time, it should not look this way." The call cut before I could ask if he had touched it. Pressure became the next subject. Deep ice is not gentle. It moves, deforms, and presses. An intact body at depth would need protection, a void, unusual material strength, or a recent placement path. If the shell formed a pressure shelter, then the body might have remained in a small, stable environment while the ice sheet moved around it. That would help explain preservation. It would also mean the artificial material was not a trinket. It had function. Function means design. Design means an intelligence built something that survived in Antarctica under conditions that destroy ordinary machines. I said that on air slowly because listeners needed the chain, not just the conclusion. Body plus shell is not the same story as body alone. The government tried to pull the word shell back within an hour. A spokesperson called it associated non-biological material. That was not a denial. It was a downgrade. Reporters asked if the material was technological. The spokesperson said no determination had been made. Reporters asked if the specimen was extraterrestrial. The spokesperson said non-terrestrial remained under review. Reporters asked if personnel were infected. The spokesperson said there was no evidence of transmissible illness beyond the contained site. Again, beyond the contained site did a lot of work. I wrote it down and read it to the audience. Words do not merely inform during crisis. Words place fences around liability. Around noon, the first political circus arrived. One senator demanded all information be released immediately. Another demanded total classification. A cable host said the body proved a decades-long cover-up. An online preacher said it was a demon. A technology investor said private industry should control the material. A defense analyst said no foreign scientist should get near it until the United States secured all associated technology. Everybody had a use for the body before the scientists had a clean sample map. That made me angrier than I expected. And the greatest discovery in recorded history had been in human hands for less than 2 days, and people were already trying to make it serve yesterday's arguments. I kept returning to the field team because those were the people inside the real risk. They had gone south to drill ice and came face to face with something no training covered. Their work tents, drill arch, sleds, generators, fuel drums, sleeping modules, medical gear, and freezer boxes were designed for harsh weather and delicate samples, not an unknown organism with strategic value. If one person made a mistake, it might not be because he was stupid. It might be because every written procedure stopped making sense at the same time. That is why I reject the easy movie version where scientists are arrogant fools. Most scientists I know are cautious to the point of irritation. The problem comes when the universe hands careful people a procedure manual with missing pages. The first confirmed quarantine breach was not violent. It was paperwork and wind. A bag of outer gloves, wipes, and sample packaging that should have stayed inside the red zone waste stream was loaded onto a utility sled during a shift change. A katabatic gust tore the top liner open before the mistake was caught. The waste did not blow across Antarctica in some cinematic disaster. It scattered across a controlled work area, maybe 50 yards, maybe less. Every piece had to be tracked, marked, and recovered by people who were already tired and cold. That is how containment fails in real life. Not because someone opens a cage, because a label is wrong. A gust hits at the worst second, and humans have to chase the consequences with numb hands. After that, the field camp went into hard isolation. Nobody moved between modules without escort. The drill site shut down. The specimen remained inside a temporary containment unit built from cold storage panels, inflatable seals, portable filtration, and whatever military team had flown south could assemble on ice in bad weather. A field camp is not a high containment laboratory. You can bring equipment, but you cannot bring the whole infrastructure of a mainland biosafety facility in one flight. Power matters, ventilation matters, waste matters, shower water matters, human sleep matters. Every system becomes part of containment. A facility built in a hurry always has seams, and seams are where bad events find room. At 3 p.m, we got the first sign the specimen might be reacting to human presence, or to environmental change caused by humans. Sensors attached to the outer ice block recorded periodic conductivity changes across the membrane. The data came from a technician who described it as weak and regular enough to be alarming. Conductivity changes can come from thawing, brine movement, instrument error, pressure changes, or internal chemistry. I said all of that before saying the obvious. Regular changes in preserved tissue are not what anyone wanted to see. If the pattern was internal, then the body had not merely survived as shape. It retained organized function at some level. Organized function is the line where curiosity starts needing armed guards. I hated the armed guards. I understood them, but I hated them. Science under rifles changes. People speak less clearly. Mistakes hide faster. Young researchers obey orders outside their expertise. Officers make decisions based on threat categories that may not fit the sample. At the same time, I could not pretend rifles were irrational. If the shell material contained unknown technology, foreign intelligence services would move. If the body carried a biological hazard, someone had to enforce isolation. If frightened workers tried to flee, somebody would have to stop them until screening happened. A rational response can still damage truth. That was the trap forming around the ice. Erin sent me one last text before her phone went dark for the day. We were told family contact may pause. I am okay. Do not say more than you can prove. That was my daughter and my editor in one sentence. I kept the phone on the desk after that and did not touch it for a long time. I wanted to call every number I had in New Zealand, but I knew what would happen. I would endanger her access, maybe her job, maybe her safety. So I did the thing reporters pretend is discipline and parents know is torment. I waited and worked. I told the audience she was safe the last time I heard from her, and I said nothing about her role. Then I moved on, because the story did not belong to my fear. The second night brought the first international break. An Italian ice core scientist publicly confirmed that colleagues in Europe had been asked to pause public comments on Antarctic oldest ice work until further notice. A French logistics contact said certain cargo categories had been frozen pending review. An Australian outlet reported unusual communications restrictions around East Antarctic programs, though officials denied any operational danger. None of those reports proved the body had anything to do with their stations. They proved governments were trying to coordinate message discipline across Antarctic science. That is hard. Antarctic research is international by design. People have friends across programs, shared data, shared aircraft histories, shared labs, shared conferences, and old arguments that cross borders faster than press statements. The treaty issue became unavoidable. Antarctica is not supposed to become a military prize box. The continent has legal protections built around peace, science, and environmental stewardship. Yet here we were, watching military logistics secure a discovery that might have scientific, biological, and technological implications beyond anything in the treaty imagination. I asked a legal scholar what should happen. He gave the most honest answer of the day. The law has principles, not a ready machine. Treaty partners had rights to transparency. The finding country had duties. The world had an interest. The field team had immediate safety needs. The specimen had no legal category. He said all of that in a flat voice, then admitted he had canceled his classes because nobody was going to listen to normal lectures anyway. The third leaked image showed the shell. I never aired it, but I will describe what I saw because it shaped every hour after. The shell fragment curved around the body in a shallow arc, dark on the outer side, pale inside, with a thickness that looked too thin for the pressure it had apparently resisted. Along the inner surface were raised points arranged in rows, not buttons, not rivets. The closest plain phrase is contact nodes, even if that phrase is imprecise. A smear of pale material lay between the body and the shell, frozen into ridges. The scale marker suggested the shell section was maybe 5 feet across at the widest visible angle. It did not resemble a spaceship. It resembled a broken part from something built for a purpose we did not yet understand. A materials engineer from Golden gave me a hard correction on air, and I was grateful for it. I had used the phrase metal-ceramic composite. He said that was too specific. Without composition testing, we could only say the material showed properties that invited those categories. Hardness, flexibility under temperature change, low corrosion, and repeating microstructure did not equal any known alloy. He also reminded everyone that unknown does not mean impossible. Humans have made materials that would look impossible to people from the 19th century. A non-human technology could still obey chemistry and engineering. The point was not magic. The point was a manufacturing history no human archive contained. At dawn on the third day, The station medical update leaked in outline. 4 people had symptoms. 2 were improving. 1 had eye inflammation and tremor. 1 had a low fever that could have been infection, stress, cold exposure, or reaction to decontamination chemicals. No deaths, no attacks, no dramatic transformations. I know some listeners felt cheated by that because panic had trained them to expect the next escalation to be bloody. I felt the opposite. No monsters gave the situation room to become worse in a more believable way. If people had been attacked, command would know the category: hostile organism. Instead, everyone faced uncertainty. Uncertainty keeps bad procedures alive longer because nobody wants to take the irreversible step. The irreversible step had a name in the leaked planning document: thermal neutralization. That is a clean term for destroying the specimen by controlled heating, chemical treatment, or both until no biological activity remains. I do not know if the plan was final or merely one option. I know scientists fought it. I also know public health officials had reason to keep it available. Imagine being the person who must decide whether the first non-terrestrial biological specimen ever recovered should be preserved for study or destroyed to prevent an unknown hazard. People online called that simple. It is never simple when all available choices can damage humanity. Preserve it and risk exposure. Destroy it and maybe erase the only evidence of another biology we will ever touch. I asked Elias directly through the secure channel if thermal neutralization was on the table. He answered 6 words. They are afraid it is repairing. I read that sentence several times before I trusted myself to speak. Repairing does not mean waking up and walking. Repair can be molecular: membrane closure, ice damage reversal, fluid redistribution, protein refolding, activation of dormant systems. Maybe the sensors were misreading thaw and brine migration. Maybe the team had found a chemical system designed to restore structure when conditions changed. Maybe the shell was helping. Every possibility was serious. The body did not need to open its eyes to become the most dangerous sample on Earth. Forstate. That afternoon, a foreign ministry official from a treaty partner used the word access in a press question. He wanted independent verification by an international scientific group. Washington said the United States welcomed cooperation once the site was secure. That phrase bought time and angered everyone. I understood both sides. Independent verification protects truth. Too many people near an unstable sample can destroy safety. The real issue was trust. No one trusted one government to control the first evidence of non-human technology. No government trusted rivals not to steal it. No scientist trusted politicians not to bury it. No ordinary person trusted any of them because ordinary people had spent years being lied to about smaller things. The body came out of the ice into a world already low on trust. By the 3rd evening, grocery stores had nothing to do with Antarctica and everything to do with fear. Bottled water shelves emptied in Denver, Colorado Springs, and parts of New Zealand because people heard specimen and contamination and filled in the blanks. Pharmacies sold out of disposable masks again. A man fired a rifle near a federal building in another state after posting that he was stopping an alien transfer that was not happening there. A school district in Colorado sent a note saying classes would continue and there was no local hazard. Parents pulled kids anyway. This is why words matter. A body under Antarctic ice can still disrupt a city thousands of miles away if the information space goes bad. I did a long segment explaining what people should not do. Do not drink bleach. Do not buy iodine tablets for a threat that has not been shown to involve radiation exposure. Do not drive to restricted facilities. Do not harass people with Antarctic program stickers on their cars. Do not believe screenshots that claim evacuation orders without official source links. Do not assume every sick person has alien contamination. Fear makes people search for action. Bad actors sell action. Sometimes the useful thing is boring. Stay informed. Check local alerts. Leave logistics facilities alone. Let medical personnel do their work. That advice will never trend, but it keeps more people alive than fantasy. The field camp reached the next threshold at 0420 Antarctic time on the 4th day. Internal temperature of the specimen, measured through the ice block, stabilized above the surrounding containment temperature without external input. The difference was small, less than 3 degrees Celsius according to the log, but it persisted. That meant one of three things: sensor error, chemical heat release, or internal energy management. The team swapped sensors. The difference remained. They moved one sensor to a control block of ordinary ice. The control block matched the room. The specimen did not. That was the moment several scientists stopped arguing about whether the body was merely preserved and started arguing about what degree of activity counted as viable. The next audio was the most disturbing because nobody screamed. A woman read measurements. A man asked for confirmation. Another person said, "No visible movement. Surface seams widening along dorsal plate. Fluid present under membrane." The woman corrected him. "Not fluid. Mobile phase." That was scientific caution under pressure. Fluid was too familiar. Mobile phase meant something inside or beneath the outer layer was moving or changing state. Then a senior voice ordered all personnel out of the inner chamber. The recording ended with boots on a hard floor, and someone reminding everyone to check seals before crossing the clean boundary. The ordinary discipline of the voices made it worse. They were scared enough to follow procedure, not scared enough to break it. I need to say this plainly. There was still no proof the specimen was conscious. No proof it knew humans were present. No proof it had intent. People wanted intent because intent makes danger easier to understand. Intent lets you point at a villain. Biology can kill without intent. Chemistry can kill without intent. A restoring organism can endanger humans simply by resuming processes that are normal for it and toxic for us. The same could be true in reverse. Our oxygen, microbes, warmth, light, and disinfectants might be attacking it. We might have been the hazard. That does not make the situation morally simple. It makes the room more dangerous for everyone inside. On the fourth afternoon, Washington made its worst communication mistake. A senior official used the phrase "ancient remains" in a televised briefing. Within minutes, Elias sent me one word: no. Several other scientists reacted the same way through private channels. Remains implies dead. Ancient implies settled age. Neither had been established. I went on air and corrected the official directly. I said the public should not accept softening words unless they matched evidence. That got me a call from a government communications office. The man on the line told me I was increasing public anxiety. I told him inaccurate calming language increases public anxiety once people catch the mismatch. He said I was not helping. I said neither was he. Then both of us sat in silence until he hung up. The correction mattered because the transfer decision was moving again. The field camp was not stable enough. A purpose-built containment lab did not exist in Antarctica. McMurdo had more infrastructure but also more people. Christchurch had hospitals and aircraft, but would bring the chain into a populated gateway city. Denver had ice core expertise, but not a facility designed for unknown extraterrestrial biology. A military installation could provide security, but not necessarily cold scientific integrity. Every destination solved one problem and worsened another. Keeping the specimen at the field camp preserved distance and cold, but field camps break. Moving it widened risk. Destroying it ended study. The decision tree was all thorns, no clean road. At 5:58, Erin called from a borrowed line. She had been screened twice and moved into a hotel wing under program control. She was not sick. She was furious about being unable to work, and more furious about rumors online using old photos of Christchurch staff. She told me the possible flight north had been delayed. Not canceled. Delayed. The disagreement was not about whether the specimen mattered. Everyone agreed it mattered. The disagreement was whether it was safer to move an active, unknown sample in a controlled aircraft package or hold it in a temporary site where power, weather, and human fatigue could fail. She said one of the medical officers had used the phrase, "Antarctica is buying us distance, not safety." That was the best summary I heard all week. That night, the shell became active too, or at least instruments near it did. Magnetometers recorded small field changes in the containment chamber. Nothing strong enough to harm people, according to the leaked log. Enough to make the materials team pull non-essential electronics back. The shell surface showed faint thermal banding that did not match external heaters. Again, no lights, no symbols, no humming alien machine from old pulp stories. Just numbers on instruments and people trying to understand whether the material was responding to temperature, the body, human equipment, or damage from extraction. The quiet readings were more believable than any dramatic effect would have been. Real danger often arrives as a line on a monitor that refuses to return to baseline. A caller asked if this was first contact. I said no, not in the way people mean. Contact requires exchange. Discovery is not contact. Excavation is not conversation. We had found a body, maybe a survivor, maybe a corpse, maybe a dormant organism, maybe a biological component of some system. It had not spoken. It had not signaled in any verified public way. Humans were the only side making statements, and humans were already fighting over vocabulary. First contact, if it ever came, would require evidence of communication or intent. Still, I understood the caller. Emotionally, the world had crossed a line. We were no longer alone in the same way, unless every official and every scientist involved was wrong or lying. That remaining possibility grew smaller by the day. The fifth day began with a death rumor. I held it for 3 hours. I am glad I did because the first version was false. No scientist had been killed by the specimen. The confirmed event was a cardiac arrest in an older camp mechanic during a shift after prolonged stress, cold exposure, and possible chemical exposure during waste recovery. He was resuscitated, then evacuated inside the controlled medical chain to McMurdo. That is still serious. It is not an alien attack. His family did not deserve to see his name turned into content by strangers. I said only what could be confirmed and left his name out. Being first is worthless if you become cruel to do it. At midday, Elias sent the longest message I ever received from him. It was written for the record in case he lost access. Specimen exhibits layered anatomy. Outer membrane not skin by mammalian analogy. Structural tissue contains repeating channels. No blood observed in human sense. Mobile phase responds to temperature gradient. No microbial growth detected on initial external swabs. Associated shell contains internal cavities. Ice contact surface indicates long duration under pressure. Do not let them say contamination. Do not let them say fossil. Do not let them say corpse. We do not know. That last sentence is the most scientific sentence in the whole disaster. We do not know. It should have guided every statement. Instead, people kept trying to replace it with words that made them feel better. The no microbial growth line drew attention from experts. It did not mean sterile. It meant initial swabs did not grow expected Earth microbes under tested conditions. That could be due to cold, chemistry, disinfectant, sampling limits, or actual absence. A biosafety scientist warned me that unknown biology may not grow on human media at human lab temperatures. A negative culture is not a clean bill of health. It is a result from one question asked in one way. If the organism used different solvents, different temperature bands, different energy systems, or non-standard biochemistry, our early tests might miss everything important. People hate that kind of answer. Real science gives it often. The world outside kept doing ordinary things. Snow fell in Denver. Traffic backed up on Interstate 25. A coffee shop near the studio ran out of oat milk and had a handwritten sign apologizing for it. A woman on the sidewalk asked me if I knew whether her son should still go to hockey practice. That question almost broke me because it was so normal. I told her yes, unless local officials said otherwise. She nodded, then asked if aliens believed in God. I told her I did not know whether the body had ever believed anything. She laughed once, not because it was funny, but because there was nowhere else for the feeling to go. Then she went to pick up her son. By the fifth evening, the international group finally got a name: the Antarctic Biological Anomaly Review Coalition. It was a terrible name, which made it sound real. Representatives from the United States, New Zealand, Australia, Italy, France, the United Kingdom, Japan, and several treaty observers were assigned remote access to sanitized data. China and Russia demanded equal access and accused Washington of withholding technological material. Washington replied with language about safety and chain of custody. The body had not moved, but geopolitics had arrived at the containment door. You could feel the scientific window narrowing. Every hour that passed made it less likely that researchers would control the discovery's meaning without interference. A young producer asked me off-air what I thought the body was. I told her my private answer, and I will give it here with the warning it deserves. I thought it was a crew member or passenger from a non-human craft or device that entered the Antarctic environment long before modern human observation. I did not know how long before. I did not know whether it crashed, landed, hid, failed, or was placed. I believed the shell had protected it from pressure and some damage. I believed the ice had kept it stable. I believed extraction had triggered repair processes. That was not proof. It was an interpretation, and good reporting must label interpretation clearly. Still, after 5 days, that interpretation fit more facts than the alternatives. The 6th day gave us the sound. I wish it had not, because sound changes public feeling faster than data. A microphone inside the outer containment chamber recorded a repeated low pulse after the shell's magnetic changes increased. The frequency sat below normal speech and came in groups with irregular pauses. Engineers argued it might be pump vibration, refrigeration cycling, structural settling, or sensor artifact. Then the refrigeration unit was powered down briefly under controlled conditions while the backup maintained temperature. The pulse continued. That did not prove communication. It proved a sound source independent of the primary cooling equipment. The clip leaked within an hour. People slowed it, raised it, added fake subtitles, and ruined any chance of the public hearing it clean. I refused to play the enhanced versions. I played the raw 20 seconds with a warning. No translation, no caption. No claim that it was speech. Just a low repeated sound recorded near a non-terrestrial specimen and associated manufactured shell. Even that may have been too much because the phones crashed after. Some people cried. Some prayed. Some asked if the sound could affect memory, fertility, electronics, dreams, dogs, tap water, aircraft, and unborn children. Fear had started building bridges between unrelated things. That is dangerous. I repeated the evidence. A sound was recorded. Its source was not confirmed. No public health effect had been shown. That was all. The military finally moved a larger containment package south on the 6th night. For the aircraft details were not public, but the broad chain was obvious to anyone watching logistics. Heavy cargo south to McMurdo. Ski-equipped support toward the interior when weather allowed. Medical and engineering staff moved under restricted communication. The package reportedly included independent cooling, battery redundancy, passive cold mass, negative pressure components, filtration units, portable lab instruments, and a sealed transfer cradle built in pieces, because no one had designed a cradle for a non-human body recovered from ancient ice. That sentence sounds absurd. It was also how real procurement had to work in that moment. Use what exists, modify fast, write the procedure while the hazard changes. At 0710 on the 7th day, the field team attempted to move the body from the emergency containment chamber into the new transfer cradle. That is where the clean narrative ends. Not because monsters appeared, because the evidence got messy. One log says the specimen surface adhered to the inner support liner and tore slightly during lift. One audio clip has a scientist yelling to stop upward movement. Another note says the shell produced a magnetic spike at the same time. A medical line says one handler reported sudden visual disturbance and nausea, then recovered. A thermal log says internal specimen temperature dropped sharply after the tear, then rose again. Each item could be real, partial, misunderstood, or connected in ways no one yet knew. Crises do not give perfect scenes. They give fragments. The transfer stopped. The body stayed in Antarctica. That was the decision after 7 days of arguments, flights, engineering, politics, and fear. The official reason was preservation of scientific integrity. The unofficial reason, according to 2 sources, was that the specimen and shell reacted badly when separated from the original ice support geometry. That phrase came from an engineer, And I believe it because no propagandist writes that ugly by choice. The body had not attacked. It had not spoken. It had not stood up. But it had forced the most powerful government on Earth to leave it where it was, because moving it safely was no longer a solved problem. People asked if that meant Antarctica was lost. No. That kind of talk is lazy and harmful. A remote field site under hard restriction is not a lost continent. McMurdo continued essential operations. South Pole personnel remained in controlled status. Treaty partners monitored their stations. Weather kept being weather. Aircraft still had to respect fuel, runway conditions, point of safe return decisions, and cold metal. The world did not end in a week. That matters. The danger was narrower and deeper than public panic wanted it to be. A field camp had become the center of human history, but most people still had to go to work, feed children, fill prescriptions, and sleep under ordinary ceilings. On the 8th day, the federal government released a carefully edited scientific summary. It confirmed a non-terrestrial biological specimen. It confirmed associated manufactured material. It confirmed incomplete viability assessment. It confirmed no evidence of hostile activity. It confirmed no spread beyond the contained Antarctic operation. It did not release images of the full body. It did not release raw sensor logs. It did not release age estimates. It did not name every exposed person. It did not answer whether the specimen had produced sound. The summary was better than silence and worse than truth. That is often where official information lands when lawyers, scientists, soldiers, and diplomats all hold pens over the same page. I read the summary live, line by line, and translated each part into plain speech. Non-terrestrial biological specimen means official language now accepts that the body is not from known Earth life, unless later analysis overturns the category. Associated manufactured material means there is technology or engineered structure beside it. Incomplete viability assessment means do not call it dead. No hostile activity means no verified attack or intent. No spread beyond containment means the public is not facing a known outbreak. Missing age estimate means the timeline remains unsettled. Missing raw data means trust remains fragile. A good summary answers questions. A controlled summary also reveals which questions still scare the people writing it. But Elias disappeared from communication after that. I do not mean vanished in the dramatic sense. I mean his account stopped answering. His university page went into media pause, and every person who knew him told me he was alive but unavailable. I choose to believe that because the alternative has no evidence and too much cruelty in it. Erin came home after 12 more days of screening and paperwork. She looked exhausted at the airport. We hugged once, hard, and then she told me she still could not talk about most of it. I told her I knew. She said, "No, Dad, you do not." That was probably true. Reporters see edges. People inside carry the center. Weeks later, the field site still existed under a new name that meant nothing to the public. A permanent containment facility began going up in stages, or at least something larger and more durable than the first emergency structures. Satellite images showed graded snow roads, modular buildings, fuel storage, antenna work, and a security perimeter that officials called environmental control. Flights moved in patterns that matched construction and long-term support. The body remained there, according to every source I trust. The shell remained there too. Antarctica had become the cold storage room for the hardest question humanity had ever opened. The scientific fight moved into quieter rooms. Age-dating teams argued over gas chemistry, dust alignment, cosmogenic markers, volcanic tie points, ice flow modeling, and deformation around the object. Biologists argued over whether non-terrestrial should remain in official terminology before full molecular analysis. Materials scientists argued over destructive sampling of the shell. Public health officials argued over what counted as safe enough to expand access. Diplomats argued over who could see what. Military officials argued over classification. Each group had rational concerns. Each group also had incentives to protect its own authority. That is not conspiracy. That is bureaucracy under pressure. And it can hide truth without any single villain deciding to hide it. The public story simplified anyway. Half the country called it the Antarctic alien. Others called it the ice body, the visitor, the fake, the demon, the proof, the hoax, the warning, or the corpse. Merchandise appeared within 10 days. Fake documentaries appeared within 2 weeks. People made maps to the field site using guessed coordinates and bad satellite screenshots. Amateur pilots talked about flying south, which is not how Antarctic access works, and would get people killed long before any soldier stopped them. Every lie had a customer. Every careful answer had to fight for air. That wore me down more than the original shock. I kept coming back to the first sentence from Elias. Do not let them call it a fossil. He was not telling me to make people believe in aliens. He was telling me to defend precision at the exact moment precision became inconvenient. Fossil would have made the discovery feel old, safe, and finished. Corpse would have done the same. Artifact would have moved attention to technology and away from biology. Threat would have moved attention to weapons and away from evidence. Miracle would have moved attention to belief and away from procedure. The right words did not solve the crisis. They kept us from solving the wrong one. Here is what I believe now, after the first weeks and after enough documents crossed my desk to make sleep harder. Something non-human was preserved in Antarctic ice beside manufactured material. It was found by legitimate climate researchers during a deep ice operation tied to old ice, dust, and impact markers. It was not discovered by treasure hunters or a secret cult. The first people who saw it were cold, tired scientists doing difficult work in a remote place. The specimen was not safely dead when removed from stable conditions. It showed signs of physical or chemical reorganization. The shell showed signs of activity or response. Human containment procedures were improvised under pressure. The government did hide information, but not because the whole event was fake. It hid information because the true version was harder to manage than silence. What I do not know matters just as much. I do not know the age. Anyone giving a confident age in public is ahead of the evidence or selling something. I do not know whether the body was a traveler, a pilot, a biological machine, a passenger, a victim, or something else outside our categories. I do not know whether the shell was transport, protection, shelter, suit, instrument, or wreckage. I do not know if the sound was communication, biology, material stress, or equipment interaction. I do not know if the repair process means eventual consciousness. I do not know if the organism is dangerous to humans by design, by accident, or not at all. There is no shame in saying we do not know. Shame begins when people replace that sentence with something useful to them. The last confirmed detail I will give tonight is small, and that is why I trust it. A technician inside the restricted review group described a new label on the containment documentation. The specimen is no longer listed under remains. It is not listed under corpse. It is not listed under fossil. The current category is preserved non-terrestrial biological entity, viability undetermined. That is cold language. It is also the closest official language has come to honesty. Viability undetermined means the door is still open. Somewhere in the dark season of Antarctica, inside layers of equipment, cold walls, guards, filters, generators, and arguments, the body remains under watch because no one with the authority to decide has been willing to call it dead. So, if you are listening to this because you want the clean ending, I do not have one. No invasion started. No city burned. No alien walked into a camera frame and explained history. The first contact people imagined did not happen. What happened was more human and more difficult. We drilled for climate history and found a biological fact that did not fit our history at all. We built a containment room around it with tools meant for other emergencies. We argued over words while the sample changed inside the cold. We protected the public from panic and also protected institutions from embarrassment. And those two motives got mixed together so tightly that separating them may take years. I still think about that Denver studio in the first minutes, before the feeds cut and before the statements changed. Cold coffee, climate graphics, a harmless segment about ice. Then, one message from an old scientist who knew the first lie would be gentle. That is how the largest stories often begin. Not with an explosion, with a professional seeing one wrong word forming in the mouth of power and trying to stop it before it becomes history. Do not let them call it a fossil. I have repeated that sentence so many times it has become the center of my notes. It is still the best warning we have. The body was preserved. The body changed. The body is still there. And the people in charge still do not know what word comes next.